Hello everyone, it's Benny, and in this video, we're going to be making monsters, finally. And the first step to that is actually getting the image of the monster, the Wolfenstein SS enemy we're going to be using. So the way you get that is you go into whatever program you want, and extract the sprite from Doom. That's the way I did it. Or if you have the original Wolf 3D, you can probably extract it from there somehow. But I'm using Doom because I don't have my copy of Wolf 3D anymore. But anyways, and actually while I was there, I went ahead and extracted all the sprites I'm going to need for the rest of the development process. So here you go. I've named them the exact same thing they are in the Doom file, so you can just look for that and you should find it. And yeah. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the way you extract these is the exact same way I extracted the textures for the wolf collection.png in whatever video showed you how to do that in. So yeah, just extract these sprites, put them in your textures folder, and you should be good to go for the rest of the Wolf 3D series. So, with all that, let's add a monster. I'll call it monster. It's actually going to be a lot like a door, oddly enough. But yeah. And why? This is interesting. Okay. I like to add it to get. Not sure why it didn't add, but okay. Anyways, so I can get rid of this notice. I don't care. And let's look at our door class for what we want to copy over. Okay, for one, we want the constructors. It's not going to need materials in open position. It's going to manage that itself. So, just in this case, just a transform. And there. And actually, at this point, I'm mostly going to go for... Oh yes, it's going to need the mesh paradigm, too. Or, I guess you're going to call it a paradigm, but you know, it's going to have its own static mesh. And just like before, we're going to initialize that in the constructor if it's null. So, and... yeah, You know what? Just for now, and because it's going to look ridiculous and interesting, I'm going to just copy the parameters from door, and we're going to give the monster the door mesh, and we're going to see just what happens. Do I need width? Is width actually... oh, it's used. Never mind. We're going to see what happens when we give the monster the door mesh. Now, another thing that makes it a little bit different is it's going to have its own texture. So, what we're well, it's going to have its own material. So it's going to have a private, actually not static, it's going to have a private material, and it's going to need to be initialized. Oh, and of course it's going to have a private, the boring one is going to have a private transform, which is just going to be directly assigned. This dot transform equals transform. And the material, however, yeah, just to show it off, my material is going to be initialized to a new material, taking in resource loader dot, does it? It's still spelled wrong, dagnabbit. Okay. What? Oh, right. I don't need that anymore. I don't know why I thought I still needed that, but I remember now. I changed it to be part of the class. Never mind. Ignore me. So yeah. It's going to be a new texture. And I'm just going to load in the basic sprite. SSWVA1. One hell of a name, but okay. SSWVA1.png. That's right? Okay. And there. And again, this is just really temporary. And let's see. It's going to have an update and render method just like before, so, or just like the door, so public void update and public void render. And yeah, I guess that's everything. No, it's not everything. In the render, I'm just going to need mesh.draw, and I'm going to need to update the shader. How do I do that in here? I want to do it the exact same way? Okay. I'm just going to copy this. In fact, I could have just copied and pasted it verbatim from door, but I felt like writing out mesh.draw myself for some reason. So, yeah. And now we can draw our monster, in theory. So in theory, at least, this should be enough to at least draw something. So, yeah, let's have a private monster. Actually, let's put it here. Let's put it as a temp variable because it actually is a temporary variable. Private monster, and here I'm going to say monster is a new monster, taking in the temporary transform I used to have for the door. And no, thank you. Okay, cool. I'll just update it and render it, and let's see what happens. Let's see how horribly ridiculous this looks, if it even works at all. So let's build. It's built properly, and let's run. Yeah. Not exactly what I'm going for, but you know, it shows it's loading properly if in a really ridiculous way, and it shows that it's drawing properly, so we've successfully set up the monster, at the very least. Okay, now, normally, since we do have something that shows up and could theoretically chase and attack the player, I'd just go ahead and do that. I'd go ahead and make the monster shoot and attack the player so we could get that mechanic in place. That's what I'd normally do, because I generally put priority on getting working game mechanics over, you know, aesthetics and whatnot. But in this particular case, I actually want to give the monster a proper mesh first. And you'll see why. So, to start off with, our monster is just going to be a texture. Some series of textures, actually. So, we just need a plane. One single plane. And the indices for that will similarly be the indices for a single plane. Let's just see how... What? Expected... What? Does that solve the issue? Okay, I guess it didn't delete something. So now we should just have a plane. It should be horribly misaligned, but it should be, nonetheless, a plane. Exactly what we're looking for. And now it's time to actually construct it properly. So I'm going to have two constants, well, three including start, but I'm going to have two constants defining the size, which would be size x and size y. Now, I'm going to start off like this. So size x will be like this. This is pretty much just like any other plane we've drawn, except I'm doing it in slightly different order. So size y, size y. Yeah, and actually I think that's everything. Yeah, so normally I'd be doing it, I think, like size... I'd normally be doing it in a slightly different order. I'm not entirely sure how you'd arrange add to this right now. Can't think for some reason, but yeah, it's the same plane thing where you just go, like... I don't know how to describe it, but if you watch the intro video, you know what I'm talking about. It's that same plane thing, just slightly different order. And this has to do with... I believe it had to do with the texture coordinates. Yeah. So I'm going to have some tex max x and tex max y. See, normally this would be, I think, right here, but I'm doing it in sort of a different order. And I forget exactly why I chose to do it in this order, but I did, and I'm just going by my notes at this point. So, yeah. And now this, I believe... Actually, let's just copy everything in first. So there. Let's actually do that. Let's copy all of this, and then I'll change it to texture min and texture max constants appropriately. And let's see if I can remember this. Yeah, maybe I should have just constructed it not verbatim from my notes in order that would make more sense, but oh well. So now, I believe this will now be tex min y, and this will be tex min x, tex min y, and then tex min x, tex max y. That's what I remember. I might be horrendously mistaken about that, but that's what I remember. And now we just have to actually create these constants. So let's get rid of these things. let's first off create a constant isn't quite any of them. It's going to be a public static final float scale, which I'm going to have at 0.7f. Again, that's coming from my notes. That's the scale that I found made them look not giant and enormous like they were in the original Wolfenstein. I always thought they looked a little weird, but maybe that's just me. So, yeah. That's what the scale constant's going to be. I'm going to create my size x and size y based on that. Size y is going to just equal the scale, and size x is going to be a little bit more interesting because I'm going to calculate it from size y. And the idea is that these will be sort of in ratio with the dimensions of the image. And I do not have this ridiculous constant I calculated memorized, so I'm going to pull up my notes, and I'm going to copy. This is how I calculated size x. I know. I know. It's... Wait. Size y, never mind. I know it looks ridiculous, but this is the ratio of the image's width to the image's height. Or maybe it's the other way around. It's the ratio of the small one to the big one, or... You know, you can figure it out. It's the one that's greater than 1 when you do the ratio, whichever combination makes that. And that's how I got this constant. And the reason I'm doing it over 2 is because I'm doing size x on sort of like a negative basis, from negative size x to positive size x. And the reason I'm doing size x sort of like negative and positive, and y, I'm not doing that for y, is because, well, here, I'll just pull up paint.net and show you. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have done this. This is taking a while. But the whole idea is that the image will be something like this. This will be my big fancy image. Now, I want the center of it to be like this, and I want the ground to be like this. So this is why I go negative and positive for x, and y, it's just from 0 to positive in y. So that way it's aligned with the floor. And... oh right, text max and min. Well, that'll be the next challenge for this, getting the texture coordinates right. Oh, and by the way, that whole, has to be 0 to the max on the y-axis and negative to positive on the x-axis. That is the reason this looks so weird. I remember now. Because if you go through it, this is the start at the minimum points, and then go minimum 1, then 1, 1, and then 1 minimum. That whole thing, it's just one of them's going from 0 to 1 and the other's going from negative to positive. That's why it looks a little bit weird there. Now I remember. Sorry about that. But anyways, now to calculate the texture coordinates, it's going to be slightly... why is this giving me a warning? Oh, right. I've misspelled size x and size y. I'm sorry. But now to calculate the texture coordinates, it's going to be a little bit more interesting. And the reason for this is because I'm going to want to offset it a little bit so that the texture is aligned properly. And this may actually horrendously screw up my image loading system, because, well, you'll see, but yeah. So, what I'm going to do here is create a public static final float like before. This is going to be offset x, which is 0.05f. That's the offset I got from my testing before, and that's the one I'm going to have now. And I'm also going to have an offset y, which is much smaller, 0.01f. These are just offsets I found from experimentation. There's no math behind this. I just chose things until it looked right. And that's what I found aligned the sprite properly. And now we can create, well, the... what's it called? Texture coordinates. It's text min x. I'm just going to start off with them equal to 0 so I can get them all out. I'm going to use the power of Control D to just type them all out a little bit faster. And now to actually calculate these. Now the minimum in x, I want... well, here's how it should work. It should start out with just negative offset as minimum, and then 1 minus the offset for the maximum. Because that way it would be, if this was 0, then it would be 0 to 1, and if there's anything else, the total size of the range would still be 1, except, well, except it would just be offset a little, like it would be from negative 0.05 to 0.95. And that's exactly what I would do, and that's exactly the type of thing I want to do for y. So 1 minus offset y. However, I found this actually makes the sprite reversed on the x-axis compared to what I'm looking for, so I'm actually going to make this negative. And I found that works out a little bit better. So, yeah. And with that, that should be everything we need to see if everything goes as planned. We should be able to see something very, very interesting. Hey, yes, we see our sprite, and it's almost right. I'm actually going to need to change to slick util to make this right. So actually, I'm going to do that, and then we're going to talk about, oh, how does that expression go? Well, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so off-screen, I went ahead and changed texture loading to use slick util like before, because, you know, slick util is actually loading the texture properly. And while I was at it, I also added all the libraries to the GitHub repository. So slick util, lightweight Java game library, the natives, etc., etc. And the reason I did this is because now, if you want to download the project, you're not going to have to go hunting all over the internet for lightweight Java game library, slick util, and all the various build dependencies. They're all included with the project, so you should just be able to load the source code in an editor, link it to the libraries, which are provided for you, and then just build and go. So that should be nice for anyone who's trying to start with this project in the future. And I'm going to go ahead and do that with the 3D engine at some point as well. So yeah. Now let's deal with the elephant in the room. That's the expression I was looking for. If I run, you notice that, well, our transparency's not working. We're just having this big blob of whiteness. What gives? Why on earth are we not getting transparency? And anyone who's worked with transparency in OpenGL probably has at least some idea of what's going on here. And the answer, for the most part, is exactly what you're thinking. We don't have blending enabled. And therefore, it's not taking the pixels from the wall and blending them with the pixels from our Wolfenstein character. So let's go ahead and change that, and let's add the node, transparency support. I know I already added it because this is take 2 and I forgot to delete it from the notes when I redid the take. Sorry. But yeah, we're going to have to add it to the engine in order for the game to not have whiteness all over the place. But yeah, that's pretty important that we have some way of supporting transparent images. So anyways, with that, now let's run, and everything's going to be working just fine. We're going to have the image, and it's going to... Wait a minute. It's still white. And wait, this is even weirder, because now the edge pixels are working fine, but the rest of the image isn't blending properly. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the transparency bug. I hate this bug with a passion. I've probably had more trouble with this, finding the cause of this bug, than just about any other bug that I've actually managed to solve in my whole history of programming. Because here's the thing, it has nothing to do with the image is clearly loading fine, and we're using an external library that's working fine, so it's no bug with slick util or whatnot. Our transparency blending, our OpenGL settings are clearly working fine because the blending is happening. So if our texture is loading properly, if it's blending properly, and if transparency actually is transparency, which it is because you can load it up in any other program and it works fine, how can transparency possibly be failing? The texture's right, the transparency's right, yet it's not working. In fact, even worse than not working, it's half working. And I had a lot of pain tracking this down, but eventually And I do mean, whoops, eventually, I did find it. And, let's see, let's go to my Wolfenstein 3D clone. Let's go to the res. Let's go to the shaders for a moment. And if you're using the 120 shaders, you'll want to look in those, but I'm using these, so let's look in these. Let's open basic fragment. And actually, yeah, let's open basic fragment. Here's the thing. One of the really weird things about GLSL that I didn't know before this is apparently if the texture is blank, then if there's no pixel that exists, then it will return 0, 0, 0. That's why our code here would work. It would be able to detect if the image is there. The really weird thing, though, is that the code for the image does not exist is the exact same code for the image that's a transparent pixel. And that's why it's not working. Because for some reason GLSL considers pixels that don't exist and transparent pixels to be exactly the same thing. Which I guess vaguely makes sense, but you'd still think that there'd be some form of distinction. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have to go to Basic Shader and change a few things. We're just going to get rid of colors. Or should we? Yeah, okay. So otherwise, it's not going to work with people. Yeah, because there's actually no way to solve this in GLSO 1.2. In GLSO 3.3, which is what we're using for this series, there is, but I really don't want to alienate you guys, so yeah, we're just going to get rid of color support. No more coloring, no more nonsense. We're just going to get rid of those uniforms, and it's just going to return... Wait. Hang on, no. One moment, I'm jumping the gun here. We're going to leave colors in, but what we're going to do is we're just not going to let this shader display just colors, because we can't do that. If we do, then it considers transparent and non-existent pixels to be exactly the same thing for some reason. So anyways, with all that out of the way, now if I run, if we don't get an error, yeah, look, sprite's working just fine. A little bit off the ground, and it's not facing us properly, but we do have an image. It is showing up, even if it still needs a little bit of adjustment. And yeah, so now we've got our monster showing up. So thank you, hope you enjoyed, hope you learned, hope you enjoy being spared from the tyranny of the transparency bug and the ridiculous GLSL nonsense. And yeah, thank you, see you next time. Hello, I'm back, because I've noticed something very, very interesting. I have my offset X and offset Y at 0 now. If I run, you notice, hey, it's looking pretty much proper, minus interpolation errors. In fact, if I go to my texture and disable interpolation, change it to... what is it? Where is the method? Oh, it's wrong class. Go to texture and change it to GL nearest. You notice it doesn't need any offset nonsense. The whole thing just loads properly. And you might be wondering, well, wait, so what happened? What did you change? Why don't you need offset anymore? And actually, as it turns out, the reason is because slickutil wasn't loading the textures in an aligned fashion for some reason. The method I had in, before I changed it to slickutil, is actually loading them in properly and doesn't need any offset nonsense. So, if you want, you can just get this method off of GitHub or video 32 of the 3D Engine series, if that's up by the time you're watching this, and you won't have to handle offsets. I'm still going to be posting them because it's going to be necessary if you're still using slickutil. But I just think that's very, very interesting that my texture loading method is loading them in a way that doesn't need any offset nonsense, and yet slickutil's method does. Anyways, thank you, hope you enjoyed, and see you next time. For real this time.